It's Matthias Cavodio. I'd like to welcome guys to my channel, and I'm finally back. I had stopped making videos because I'm actually on a work trip 700 kilometers from my house. I live in Cordoba, Argentina, which is in the middle of my country. I'm a migratory inspector, so I work at the airport, but since there's no flights, they sent me out 700 kilometers to a place called Gualeguaychú on the frontier with Uruguay. And actually, I'm working in Uruguay, which is our neighbor country, and so that's pretty cool. But the thing is, I'm pretty far away from our comic book collection. So what I did, because I did wanted to keep uploading videos, I have like this really weird OCD where I take statistics from my comic books, all the battles that the characters have, and wins, losses, and ties. I don't know why I do it, but I've always done it. And today I brought with me on this trip, I tallied up the stats for a couple of my favorite superheroes and with which villains they battled the most and stuff like that. So I'm going to do a top 10 of their rogues gallery. Today we're going to start with Spidey, because Spidey has some really solid villains. Like when you see some certain characters on a Spidey cover, you're in for a really good story. They bring out the best and the worst in heroes, and without further ado, let's get into this. Like each one of the characters, I don't have like every single appearance, and I only focus on comic books that I physically have. And living in Argentina, it's really hard to get a lot of comic books. You might get the beginning of a series, and it would be just canceled for no reason, and so that's sort of irritating. And I don't read digital comics. I used to read digital comic books back in the day, but for some reason it doesn't feel the same. I like having the physical copy in my hands. So without that aside, we're gonna get into this. At number 10, I put Spidey battling against Deadpool. Within my collection, they battle 4 times. I know they've done it many more times than that, but in the case within my collection, Spidey gets 1 clear win. I think it was, I'm trying to rely on my memory, in the Deadpool and Cable series way back in the early 2000s. It's probably the first time they ever battled, Wade and Spider-Man. And then we have 3 ties. And what I really love about the relationship between Spidey and Deadpool is that they're uneasy allies. Wade really gets under Peter Parker's skin. He really annoys him. But Wade really admires Spider-Man. Spidey does realize this whole situation, so he tries to tolerate him as much as possible. And all the crazy antics of Deadpool, and how Spider-Man is just totally blown away with this insane way of carrying himself and stuff like that. Always get some really good laughs. So at number 10, we had Deadpool. Number 9, since I'm a really big X-Men fan, I have a lot of battles of Spidey fighting against evil mutant characters. So we have villains like the Blob. Let me see here, because it's really dark, so I'm really struggling to read what I have written down here, because I'm sort of sitting in this patio outside. We have the Blob, the Marauders, Marrow, Dark Beast. So within my collection, Spidey pulls off 4 clean wins, 2 ties, but he's clashed quite a bit with evil mutant characters, and we're going to leave those bad guys behind. With number 8, I actually put Carnage. For some reason, I never really liked Carnage as a character. I know there's some really awesome Spider-Man and Carnage stories, but for some reason, I've never been drawn to him. It's just, I really like Venom. I think he's an awesome character, but Carnage, sometimes I think he's just a little bit too overkill and a little bit too cliche in the way he carries himself. The last big Carnage crossover never came out here in Argentina, so I know I'm really missing out on that. So at number 8, Carnage has Spidey pulls off 2 super solid wins and 3 ties with Carnage. Then we were at number 8. Number 7, we have a classic Spider-Man villain, the Rhino. He's just a dumb thug with super strength, but I just really enjoy this character. Even though Spider-Man never has trouble defeating Rhino, I just have a real soft spot for this villain, and you're gonna have just a one and done story. Spider dealing with the Rhino. He always clobbers him when he's trying to rob a bank or something like that. But one of the first comic books that I ever bought of Spider-Man, no, not the first one. The first one was with Wendigo and Wolverine. But back during that time, there was a Deadly Foes of Spider-Man story where we had the Rhino. He was in that story with Boomerang and a couple of other characters. So I always have a soft spot for Rhino because he was like in one of the first comic books that I ever bought. Then we have another classic Spider-Man villain, which is Mysterio, which I have within my collection 8 battles with Spider-Man. Spidey pulls off 5 clean wins, 2 losses, and 1 tie. And basically with Mysterio's power set, they can just do some really interesting stuff and make Spider-Man question reality. And the second Spider-Man movie within the MCU, I really love the way they use Mysterio as a villain, even though there's too much comedy in that movie. There's some things that I really didn't like about that movie, but Mysterio as a main villain within that movie was fantastic. Jake Gyllenhaal, I think was the name of the actor. They really killed it with him. Then at number 5, we have the Lizard within my collection. They battled 8 times. Spidey pulls off 4 clean wins, and then we have 4 ties. And the Lizard, actually, I saw another YouTube video about this, and this character has a problem that they always like sort of reset the characters. They always set him back to his main story of Kurt Connors not having an arm, wanting to see his family, dealing with the loss of his child. And that's sort of irritating. Like writers just don't know where to take him outside of that. There was one really solid story, which I really love. It's one of the darkest Spider-Man stories out there, where the Lizard persona takes over Kurt Connors, and to sever his lassos with humanity, he goes and kills his son. It's a freaking dark story. It's one of the best Lizard stories ever. But a few story arcs later with Lizard, he's back to being the normal Lizard. His kid is alive again. His ex-wife is back. And it's just a real shame they never can. That particular villain has never gotten a proper evolution. Every time they take one step forward with Lizard, they always take him back to his original status quo. So I find that really, really annoying. And I really hated the way they used the Lizard in the Amazing Spider-Man villain movies as a villain. He was just basic as hell. They could have done so many interesting things with Lizard, but it was totally meh. Number 4, I put Venom. Venom's a totally awesome villain. Anti-hero. Hero. He's the total package. Within my collection, they also clash 8 times. Spidey pulls off 6 clean wins. And we have 2 ties, at least within my collection. And the whole situation with the symbiote, Eddie Brock, the history with Peter Parker and all that, there's so much interesting material to make really awesome stories between both of these characters. There's a lot of bad blood between both of them. And also we have to throw into the mix Flash Thompson when he had the symbiote, and the whole thing with Venom, Anti-Venom. Then there was a time when Scorpion had the Venom symbiote, which that particular incarnation of Venom I really liked too, because he was like super violent and super dangerous, and he was like a straight up villain. And so like Venom as a character just has so much potential, and aesthetically his design is freaking awesome. So that's why I put Venom at number 4. Number 3, I put the Green Goblin, because he doesn't pop up enough. Like I really, really love the character of Norman Osborn, and I think they did a fantastic job of making Norman Osborn a credible villain to the whole Marvel Universe during the Dark Reign. I really loved what they did with that character. Norman Osborn's relationship with Peter Parker and with Spider-Man and the Green Goblin also. There's so many good stories, even though they went a little bit overboard a couple of times, like the time Norman had sex with Gwen Stacy. I was going to say Gwen Stefani. That's the singer of No Doubt with Gwen Stacy. They had kids and stuff like that. let's just forget about that. But outside of that, the whole situation and relationship between Peter Parker, Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, Harry, there's so many gut-wrenching stories. But during most of the time I've been collecting comic books, the Green Goblin was dead. He was brought back pretty late in the game. So that's why he doesn't appear as many times as other villains do within my collection. But he's a real treat. I really love like Norman Osborn. As I said again, if you haven't read anything from The Dark Reign, any of the stories with Norman Osborn, they are totally freaking awesome. I also forgot to mention the Thunderbolts run. That was also really good. Thunderbolts with Norman Osborn, Dark Avengers, the whole thing with the Iron Patriot. That was also so awesome. So I got into reading comic books back in the late 80s. So the Goblin of the time was Hobgoblin. There was a ton of different Hobgoblins. So it gets a little bit confusing. And I also throw into the mix Demi-Goblin, Jack-o'-lantern. There's been a ton of incarnations of similar characters with the same moniker. So within my collection, Spidey has battled actually 14 times with Spidey defeating, having clean victories 3 times over Hobgoblin, losing 4, tying 6. I don't remember if I mentioned with Norman Osborn. Well, let's go back to number 3. Spidey has defeated Green Goblin 6 times and tied 5. So with Hobgoblin, there's so many good, awesome stories. The Hobgoblin himself, aesthetically, he's really cool. I really like the story where Hobgoblin starts attacking Harry Osborn so he can get his hands on the Goblin Serum from Norman Osborn. And since he can't get that Goblin Serum, he makes a deal with the demon Nast here during the Inferno crossover, so we get the birth of Demi-Goblin. So that's like one of my favorite Hobgoblin stories. So moving forward, at number 1, we have Dr. Octopus. He's just a freaking awesome villain. Again, here we have a villain that has a relationship with Peter Parker and also with Spider-Man. So we have that dynamic working on 2 levels. And let us forget the time he had that relationship with Aunt May and they did some pretty funky things together. But outside of that, Dr. Octopus, within my collection, they clash 15 times. So like if I see Doc Ock on the cover, I'm going to go buy it. Spidey defeats him 7, loses 5, and ties 3. And then we have the whole thing with the Superior Spider-Man, the time Doc Ock stole Spider-Man's body. He hijacked it. And the whole story with the Superior Spider-Man, oh man, that was freaking awesome. Then we also, after that, we have the return of Otto Octavius. And there's just so many good stories. But basically the story arc where Doc Ock hijacks Spider-Man's mind, it's heartbreaking to see the whole situation for Peter Parker, the way he dies and stuff like that. They did a really good job with that. And also the Revenge of the Sinister Six. That's like one of the first story arcs I read back in the day when I was a kid, and it was freaking awesome. And that really put Dr. Octopus up there as like one of Marvel's major villains. That crossover was fantastic. So Return of the Sinister Six, if you haven't read it, go out and get your hands on it. And you also have fantastic art by Eric Larson, if I remember correctly, on that story. You have Nova, Fantastic Four. Sleepwalker pops up. Like Marvel was like really pumping out all those new characters from that time, showing them off in that story. Solo, that was another character. So I've been rambling on too much in this video. I just hope you guys liked it. And I'll be back to doing my reviews of my comic books and stuff like that. So see you guys next time. Bye.